Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's at the top of the hour. We're just giving it a moment or two for all of our guests to get settled. And we're so glad you're here. I'm Dr. Nika White. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am so delighted to be holding space for this community of learners as we learn with and from each other. You have joined Intentional Conversations VodCast. For those of you who are just double checking to make sure you're in the right place, we're so glad you're here. This is an opportunity that we bring to the broader community from NWC, where we invite you all to go deeper into your learning journey as we deepen our understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. This podcast is an opportunity to intersect the work of DEIB with leadership and business. And we're so delighted that you have decided to join us today. You could be anywhere, but we're grateful. If you would go to the chat or go to the comments if you're joining us via LinkedIn Live, let us know where you are joining the conversation from today. It's always a treat for us to know where people are joining the conversation from. Good morning to Kia from New York, New Jersey. Thank you. Let's keep that going. And if you're also inclined to share other information about yourself, maybe like your LinkedIn information, that lets us know that you are willing to engage with this community beyond this window of time. And we certainly value that as well. We have South Carolina, we have Switzerland, we have Charlotte, we have Long Beach, California. So keep those chats coming. And Georgia's in the house as well. We're so grateful. I want you to know that if you're joining us via the Zoom community, that you are encouraged to have your cameras on, but cameras are not required. They're only just encouraged because we love to see smiling faces, but we also know that many of you could be joining just in an observatory or auditory capacity. And nonetheless, we welcome you. We also want you to know that at NWC, we do believe in disability inclusion. So we have closed caption that has been enabled for those who may have value in having that available to you today. Seeing all of those places being specified in the chat, and I'm loving it. We have Wichita, we have Virginia, Amsterdam. That's so awesome. Okay, once again, you've joined Intentional Conversations VodCast, and we're so glad you're here. Welcome. Let the conversations begin. Indeed, as the slide just said, and you have joined Intentional Conversations VodCast. So glad you're here with us today. We have a wonderful show that has been prepared, and I know the conversation is going to be rich and insightful. And I know that you all are going to help us co-create this experience by engaging with us, whether you're on LinkedIn Live into the comment section or into the chat if you're here with us in the Zoom platform. So we've been communicating that this month, August, is National Black Business Month, and I want to continue to amplify that, not just during this month, but all throughout the year, especially as a Black founder myself. But I want us to all be more intentional about supporting Black businesses, and that is critically important because it helps to really fuel our economy when we do so. So make sure you're supporting Black businesses in your local community and beyond. Just want to take an opportunity to continue to remind you that LinkedIn Learning course number 1 for me has released actually a couple months back. It's all about individual accountability for equity and inclusion. So I hope that you will take advantage of that and take that course, share it out with others that you think may also benefit from it. Now, if you are new to this group, you may not be aware of the fact that I released book number 3 earlier this year in partnership with Forbes Books. It's called Inclusion Uncomplicated, a transformative guide to simplify DEI. It's available anywhere where you like to purchase your books. You can get it in Kindle, you can get it in hard copy, or you can get it in audio. Whatever way in which you decide to take advantage of this content, I am grateful for your support. And I also ask that you consider going to Amazon and writing a review. Thank you so much for your support of Inclusion Uncomplicated. I also want you to know that if you're someone who maybe you can't make it every Friday at this hour to actually join us live and you don't want to miss this content, every single week we take the content from Intentional Conversations VodCast and we extract the audio and we make it available on the go in a podcast capacity. And so you have multiple ways of getting this information, and we are thrilled to be able to provide multiple options for you. One of the things that we like to do at NWC is make sure that we're providing ways for people to engage in deepening their understanding and knowledge of DEIB. And so part of our offering in that regard is to release weekly these short clip videos, no more than 2 minutes in length, called Inclusion Uncomplicated. And so if you're really interested in having just some snapshots of insight that you can put into your hearing every single day to begin to build up your knowledge and understanding of DEIB, I would encourage you to go check out our YouTube channel. My team will place that information into the chat. But again, you can find hundreds and hundreds of Inclusion Uncomplicated videos that are right there at your fingertips. Now, before I get into the opportunity of introducing my guest co-host for today, I often like to tell you what's coming up in terms of our lineup of guest speakers. And so you'll see on the screen that we're rounding out the month of August with Rhonda Midget. And then we also have some great co-hosts that have been confirmed already for the month of September. So mark your calendars, plan to be here with us, and share that opportunity out with others in your network as well. Now, it does me great pleasure to formally introduce our guest co-host for today. I never take it lightly when our guest co-hosts say yes to our invite. And so today is no exception. I'm really excited for you all to be in community with Dr. Stephanie M. Kirkland. Stephanie M. Kirkland is known as the identity shaper. Dr. Stephanie M. Kirkland is the CEO and founder of Identity Dynamics, a leadership development company. Dr. Kirkland has created and facilitates an identity-centered leadership development program for organizations that want to build resilient leaders, retain talent, execute measurable DEIB goals, drive a sustainable culture of equity and inclusion, and enhance leadership capabilities. Who does not want all of those things a part of their organization, right? She believes that identity-centered leadership programs set the stage for transformational organizational growth. By guiding leaders in building and developing their leader identity and leadership philosophy, it creates sustainable impact on the day-to-day mindset and behaviors of the leader, the teams, and organizations. And so if you're here with us, VodCast community, or whether you're live on LinkedIn, I want you to go to the chat section, go to the comment section, and please find those emojis, find those words of affirmation, but help me to welcome our guest co-host today, Dr. Stephanie M. Kirkland. So excited to have you. And I'm going to add you to the spotlight. And my friend, I gave you a little bit of warning, but not too much. But I said that one of the first things I would ask you to do before you greet this audience is to find a way to share something with us that we would not know from reading your bio or even from looking at your LinkedIn profile. So welcome. And what would you like to share with us today, Dr. Kirkland?
Well, I think I'm going to share something that really also ties into my understanding of identity-centered leadership. And so the thing that I'm going to share is I know how to crochet. Yes,
Oh,
I can
yay.
crochet. I can make blankets. I can make scarves. I can crochet. Now, the connection with the crocheting is it was taught to me by my grandmother. And when I used to go to visit her in the summers, we used to get on her porch. She had a screened-in porch, Dr. Nika. And when it rained, it seemed like I always went up there when it rained. And when it rained, we would sit on the porch, and she would always bring me this bright pink yarn. And she would teach me how to do my little chain. And she would sit making these big, beautiful blankets. And I'm doing my little chains link by link by link, but that historical context, that lived experience, right, that has shaped a part of who I am as an individual, my creativity, my lens to try new things. And so crocheting is peace for me. Rain and crocheting, those are peaceful things for me. And so whenever I see that, it reminds me of her. But it also reminds me of my connection to who I am as an individual.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. And you said that crocheting for you is peace. And I was just going to say that I've heard from some other folks that are into crocheting that it's very therapeutic. It's almost like their escape for a moment. And
Yeah.
so I think that's important, especially as we really lean into mental health, right? And we encourage people to find those outlets that allows them to have a sense of peace and rest. And I'm
Right.
so glad that you found yours. And it's really inspiring me, and I'm sure probably some other folks in the audience today to think intently about what is that? What is our crochet? If it's not crocheting, then
Yeah.
what is that for us? And so
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing. So I want to jump right into this notion of being an identity shaper, and you touched on that a little bit as you were sharing your one information that maybe we wouldn't know about you from reading your bio. But can you tell us a little more about your background and what led you to start Identity Dynamics, and what exactly is an identity shaper?
Well, what Identity Shaper has actually come from my clients. As
Hmm.
people would go through my programs and they were like, "Girl, you shaped my identity, girl," you know. And I had one of my clients in particular, and she said to me, she was like, "Stephanie, you're an identity shaper," and I was like, "What?" She
Hmm.
said, "Yeah, you help people find the pieces to who they are, and you help
Oh,
us shape it. You help give us, shape and aesthetics to how we show up." And she said, "You should call yourself an identity shaper." And so I told her, I said, "I'm still in that. I'm still
I
in it.
love
I'm not
it.
giving no credit." And she was like, "You ain't gonna give me credit," trying to be funny. But yeah, and that's how it stuck. It stuck from a client sharing that with me.
I love that. So
Mhm.
in your own words, I know that your client kind of inspired the name Identity Shaper, but obviously it was because you were showing up in a certain way, producing certain results for people. So tell us, what is that approach? What is that like? And how have you seen your approach to identity shaping of individuals change their lives?
Um, my approach to identity shaping or identity centered leadership is really about how do we harness our identity and all its complexity and all of the varieties of what makes us who we are. And then how do I leverage who I am to support how I show up,
Yeah.
right? Not pulling off of other people's lens or looking at, oh, what works for them, but no, what are the pieces that make me who I am? What are my beliefs? What are my values? What are my characteristics? What are the things that I want to hold as my divine truths as a unique individual? What is my perspective? And by putting all of those pieces together, now, how do I, as we go, if we're talking about workspaces, how does that shape my leadership? How do I harness my identity to shape my leadership? Because there's this quote that says, identity work is leadership work. And
Oh,
we
yeah.
can't have identity, we can't have leadership without understanding who we are, because it is together, right? It is one. And I used to hear this saying all the time in organizations where leave yourself at the house, but bring
Yeah.
your skill set. I can't leave myself, who I am,
Yeah.
how I show up, my perspective, my lens, my opinions, how I see things. All of those things encompass who I am as an individual. There is no leaving me. And so that's all of those things came together with regards to now, how do we have this conversation around shaping our identity and then using that to propel our leadership?
I love that. So tell me a little bit about your training and your background that positions you for this unique niche of work around leadership development.
It started with my own journey.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
started with me wanting and asking the question, who am I? Why am I here? And what is this like? I know, just like some of the people on your show, I know what it's like to have a skill set. I know what it's like to be able to be everything to everybody, because we as women, we have all of these multifaceted aspects of our identity. And I
Mm.
was doing all of that, right? The mom, the wife, the choir leader, the Bible study leader, I knew how to do all of these things, but I never actually said, but who am I? Not what I can do for others, not what other people want me to be for them, but Stephanie, who are you outside of roles and responsibilities? I knew
Yeah.
how to do the roles, right? We know. I knew
Mhm.
how to take my responsibility, but I never stopped and said, but how do I show up? Like, what are my gifts? What is my perspective? what does this mean for me? So the journey started with me going on my own journey, trying to figure out what that meant for me. And then after that, I started teaching it, Dr. Nika. I was like, well, I'm going to teach somebody. I'm going to teach somebody else about what they think, right? So really, it started with classes. I started teaching classes as I grew and I learned. I'm a spiritual person. So I remember driving down the road one day and I just heard the Spirit say to me, the way that you did this for yourself is the way you will help other women do it too. And I was like, yeah, okay. Let's go.
I love that.
And so after that, I just started teaching just small classes, Dr. Nika, nothing deep, just a class here, a class there. And it started growing. And then women started telling other women about my classes. And then women started showing up. So I did it doing luncheons. And so I would start doing luncheons and they showed up at my luncheons. And then it got bigger and I started doing conferences. And then it was like, okay, and then it shifted. Now, how do I put all of these pieces and all of these components together to create a program and a process that supports women who are doing that seeking? And I started a program called In Pursuit of Me. And, it started as a 9-month, and then we eventually got to around a 6-month course set. And just started empowering women through those programs and through those classes, through coming together through those different aspects of who we are. And it started to build where my curriculum started being based around 5 pillars: personal, professional, spiritual, physical, and relational. Now, and then the course is centered around those different components of how we showed up in spaces. And during this time, I started going back to school, needing to learn more of the research components. And I remember sitting in a individual psychology class in my master's program, and he started talking and explaining this particular person's concept of individual psychology. And I was like, excuse me, like, that's my program. Are you telling me the man from the 1800s is like talking about what I've been teaching for these last? And it just blew me away. I was like, oh my God, this guy is teaching my class. And, in the class, everybody started laughing. But it just started connecting. The pieces started connecting. And I was like, well, what is your message? What is your life called to speak? How do you show up? How are you supposed to be impacting in that space? And so it just grew from my journey on to, just bringing that research and that understanding with education. And then it ended with me doing my doctoral work, where my conversation is the portrait of a leader. How do we decenter prototypical leadership norms and normalize African-American women's leadership in spaces?
You just said so much, and I'm just taking some quick notes because I want to make sure I can go back and ask very pointed questions about some of the things you shared. And by the way, none of us are sensing that you have any passion for this work at all. So
I love it. I love it.
Going through. Yeah. You're definitely in your wheelhouse, in your calling, executing your purpose. And I think that's beautiful. And that's a gift. And I think that there's probably a lot of people maybe that sit back and they listen to you talk so passionately about how you found your way and precisely what your identity is and all of the things that connects to that identity. And there's some people who are honestly, they're kind of wandering nomads. They're like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I don't know really what I care about too much. It's hard for me to articulate really the skill sets that I feel like could be used in multiple capacities. And so I would imagine that this type of service is really needed and is welcome. And some people don't even know to ask for it, So I'm interested to understand from your vantage point, Dr. Stephanie, how do you help people or coach people around realizing that they need this identity shaping type of exercise or support?
Well, I think because everybody wants to know their purpose, I don't have to convince anybody of that. You know what I'm saying? Everybody wants to know, why am I here? I get that all the time. Well, why am I here? And I always say, I think we redefine purpose in a way that makes us chase after something that's already on the inside of us.
Yeah, that's true.
And I say to people all the time, what is the message your life is called to speak? Instead of what is my purpose? Because I believe we all have a message. Our life speaks something. We have these victories. We have these traumas and lived experiences that have culminated into us having insight and authority around understanding. And so part of my program is, well, what is that message? Where is your victory? How do you show up with that? What is it that you want to share? Because a part of the In Pursuit of Me is we discover our unique identity. We become our best selves. We empower our lives, and then we turn that around and impact with it. And I believe our impact is us. I believe we are the gift.
Yeah.
I am the gift. You are the gift. You are the gift to the world. How you talk and how you look and how you act. Don't reduce that. That's the power of challenging prototypical leadership norms in workspaces. Because now what we're doing is we are exchanging the greatness of who we are for assimilation. And I use that word intentionally. Now we're assimilating ourselves into caricatures and dynamics that aren't even expressions of how we show up in our greatness, right? But if I grab hold to it, Dr. Nika, and I say, this is me, I'm loud, I laugh loud, this is all me, right? But own it, then your tribe shows up. The people who appreciate your greatness shows up. You create authentic, beautiful relationships because you're not hiding yourself. So to me, purpose is me. Purpose is my message. Purpose is my victory. Purpose is my journey. Purpose is my impact, and how the people who are in my circle are impacted by me and what that means. And so I think purpose is me. Purpose is my lived message and journey.
You have an amazing use of words and how you string them together. I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but it's beautiful to kind of hear you speak. It's inspiring to hear you speak. I loved how you said that, the message of our lives, what is it supposed to speak? And being on a journey of being able to answer that is so important because it is directly tied to our purpose. And I love how earlier you said that when we are talking about who we are, our identities, that we often are assigning that to our roles and our responsibilities and not to the broader spectrum of all these other things that make us who we are. And I think that's so critically important. I want to talk a little bit about your personal leadership philosophy. You've touched on it a little bit, but I want to go deeper there. And this is getting me into another discussion that I want to have as a follow-up about the prototypical leadership, because I think that sometimes people will try to align with a already subscribed leadership approach or style instead of being on a journey to find their own approach. And so what is your leadership philosophy? And then let's talk about the prototypical leadership style and how that connects to this broader conversation we're having today.
Well, from the context of when I talk about leadership philosophy, my lens is, what are my beliefs? What are my values? How do I link that to how I desire to show up as a unique individual because I impact with who I am, right? So my philosophy first is, again, back to that quote, leadership work is identity work. I cannot be a great leader without leading myself first. That leads us all down the rabbit hole of emotional intelligence, right? Before I can I first need to do the work for myself. So the core of my philosophy is you have to do the personal work. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the follower or the leader. I have to do this work. And listen, when I do this work, it increases my capacity to appreciate other people across difference.
Yes.
Because I've done the work. I have a lens to appreciate other people's difference because I'm appreciating my own difference.
Your own, yeah. If we can't accept ourselves because we haven't really clearly identified who we are, how can we then accept others who are different from us? I love that.
Yeah. And there's no way around the brain work. Like, I love the little neuro stuff, Dr. Nika, right? We can't get beyond that with the brain work, right? When we talk about, neuroplasticity, the ability for us to be able to change and to grow and to shift in connection to, right? And what we fail to realize as unique individuals, a part of my philosophy is you need to understand how the brain works. And a lot of times, because we don't understand how the brain works, it helps us to walk in spaces of offense or frustration because we think someone is attacking us. But really, the explanation is, this is what your brain do, baby. Your brain do this.
Right. That's right. This is bad people is part of just being humans, right?
We are all human, right? We all carry biases because our brain puts things, and I'm gonna do it real low, low level in categories. I know there's a bigger conversation, but we really categorize things, right, with our decision process, and our reticular activating system in the back of our brains comes into connection with what that looks like, what's going on around us. It takes all of our lived experience, all of our interpretation, our beliefs, our values, and it puts it in categories so that when we come into connection with other people, relationships, perspectives, and lenses, it goes straight to our default setting. Going back to why identity-centered leadership is important, because if you don't know your defaults, if you don't know your settings, if you don't know who you are and your upbringing has impacted that, right? Going back to philosophy, because my desire is we all need to develop a philosophy. We all need to understand what that looks like with our beliefs, right? And when we know ourselves, back to the philosophy question, then I can, when I deal with you, understand that my philosophy is impacting how I'm dealing with you, right? Absolutely. So if I see someone who's single, I can have a philosophy that marriage is great. Marriage is better than anything, right? And then, so when I look at a single person, if I'm not conscious of my lens, you know what I'm gonna tell her? Girl, you need to get married.
Yeah.
You need a man.
Why are you not married? Which a lot of people are like, really, that's off-putting to ask a single person, why you haven't got married yet? Or like, why you haven't had kids yet? Yes, I totally get it.
But it's my paradigm.
Yes.
It's my philosophy of self that is helping me to interact with the world. And I am unconscious of my own beliefs and values and intentions around how I show up. So I'm projecting, right? So now I'm projecting, because we live in, all of us, every last one of us, we live in a paradigm. We live in our own little worlds. And when we don't increase our capacity with an identity-centered lens, we don't avail ourselves to a bigger picture that allows other people to be who they are. And me not thinking in a binary way that I have to be right and you have to be wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. I love that. I'm just taking it all in for a moment, as I'm sure this audience is as well. And we're getting some good commentary happening into the chat. Great. So I want to jump into your doctoral studies. You did reference that earlier. And I would love for you to tell us a bit more about your findings and what was the impetus that led you to that very particular study.
Well, my study was about how do we decenter prototypical leadership norms and normalize African-American women's leadership in dominant culture organizations. And the conversation kind of started based on my lived experience, my journey of being a Black woman, being a woman in leadership, having that the intersectionality of all of the things that made me who I am, and then having clients who were leaders, who were dealing with those same dynamics and coming into concept with that. And then talking to women who were executives in leadership spaces and recognizing, so what makes them a success? And what are the real, the leverages for the conversation that I wanted to have was, we know what's wrong. We know the challenges, but there's no research about why we're successful. I know the research around what's keeping Black women from leadership spaces, but I don't see anybody talking about how to help them be successful. What are the keys? What is the sauce? And so I started interviewing executive Black women around their sauce. Why are you successful? Why are you successful? What happened? And oh my God, Dr. Nika, they all said the same thing. All of them. I know who I am. And I know how I show up. I have a sense of self. I don't let anybody tell me who I'm not, no matter what. And I'm willing to deal with the consequences of showing up as me. Girl. And they all said it. All of them. And so I was like, okay, so now how do I have a conversation with this to create curriculum, because I love creating curriculum and I love creating those types of things. I said, so how can I take this knowledge and create a curriculum that supports women who are already in executive spaces, who are dealing with the challenges of, like, is it me? Like when I do executive coaching, I mean, like powerhouse Black women, and they're going, Stephanie, I know who I am, but sometimes, girl, I'd be like, is it me? Like, is it really me? Am I the problem? I don't think I am, but I need you to talk to me because, this is getting out of hand. And so being able to have this curriculum and talk about these concepts of having a sense of self, and that's why I called it the portrait of a leader, because based on research, Black women are considered to be non-prototypical. Think about that.
Yes,
But
we are.
we use prototypical leadership norms to find, recognize, and advance leaders.
Yeah.
If research says I'm non-prototypical, you're not looking for me.
Mm.
You don't even consider that I have a leadership modality.
Right.
And so in my research, I pulled out these competencies that I heard women say made up who they were to develop what it was for their success. And so I began to train as a part of my doctoral work, training on these competencies and helping the women develop out their leadership blueprint, right? Who am I as a leader? How do I show up and what that looks like? Who am I and how do I want to be engaged? And then now, how does that impact my leadership with people, right? And what I also found interesting is 99% of the women who went through my research on the back end, the women who took my curriculum that I trained, they didn't even know they had a modality. They never heard that they had a modality. They only heard of styles or gender theory norms, those types of things. But to say, what? We got a modality? We have a show up? I need to know what that is, right? And so that's the culmination of my research. We have a leadership modality, African-American women do. But in order for it to be effective in spaces, we have to decenter what the prototypical leadership norms are, which are based on two people or two groups, white males and white women. And they have a lived experience. They have a show up. They have lenses, right? They have, different types of ways in which they have been impacted. But we're saying they're the default setting for leadership. And we're treating everybody as if that norm can actually facilitate everybody else's lived experience. And we know that's not true, because if we continue to use it, we will continue not to be able to recognize or engage other people from that we consider to have marginalized identities to have space in this leadership dynamic. And it's not about skill. My research said it's not about skill, it's not about ability. It is about the challenge of coming against a prototypical leadership norm that keeps me invisible, and only visible when you need me for account, and invisible when I need to really show up as myself.
So I'm a little speechless right now because this is so resonating with me on a deep, deep, deep level. What keeps coming up for me is take up space. Take up space. That's all I keep hearing, just, repeating in my head. That's what it means. What you have just described, Dr. Stephanie, is what it means to take up space. Because we aren't taking up space when we are just conforming and assimilating. And because we're so conditioned to this prototypical leadership, which is all about centering whiteness, because that is how we as a society define leadership, define professionalism, unfortunately. So I love that you are bringing such great gems to this conversation that is rich. And I hope that this audience is getting it to the level and the extent in which it's resonating with me. And I believe so, just by looking at some of what's happening in the chat right now. Okay, so we're going to be shifting in just a little to take some questions and comments from the audience. And you can let us know that you're interested in doing so if you're a part of the Zoom community by using the raise hand feature. And I will call on you, I will spotlight you, and I will allow you to unmute yourself and share. If you are just here and you do have a question, but would like to maybe share your question through the chat, we will make sure that that gets presented on your behalf within the time that we have remaining. And if you are joining us LinkedIn Live, we haven't forgotten about you. Go to the comment section. We're closely watching questions that you may place there so that Dr. Stephanie can engage with you in that way. So as you percolate on maybe your curiosities that are coming up, your questions and contributions you want to make, I'm going to go to maybe another question or two just to give you that time. So I want to talk about how identity-centered leadership can improve talent assessments, succession planning, performance management, particularly from a lens of the inequalities, the inequities that exist. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Again, I'm going to say the same thing. It starts with the person who is actually giving the test or having the succession planning, having the conversation. If we do not increase our capacity by not just having Black women go through the program and do the work, but everybody has to do this identity work. Everybody has to increase their capacity to understand who they are and how they show up and what is impacting what that means for them. Everybody needs to know what their identity blueprint is. Because if you do not know, you then become unconscious to how you are impacting the world around you and how you are interpreting what is going on around you.
Yeah.
And for example, there is a research study that is talking about, I'm writing an article called Redefining Black Women's Communication in Spaces. And in this research study, it's so fascinating. They show that Black women use direct communication in order to reduce conflict and to reduce confusion, right? That's how we show up. But the research study also shows that white women's lens for the reduction of conflict and the reduction of confusion is more of a avoidance kind of conversation and communication. And ambiguous,
and
kind of going around it, kind of leaning into. So when you don't know that about yourself, if you don't know that that's not how you show up, then when you see a Black woman coming to you and say, so what's the problem? Why aren't we addressing that? So why can't we go this way? Is that not what's happening, right? We were taught how to do that from our childhood. I remember I have been surrounded in my youth. I love to talk about the history because that's the intersectionality, right?
Yes.
My mom and my aunties, they'd be like, girl, talk louder. Speak up.
Mm-hmm.
What's the problem? You can't say what you mean and mean what you say?
Yeah.
Get to the point. Get cut. So that is our imprint. That is our show up. That is how we have been taught, direct, right? But the biggest issue that my executive coaching clients have an issue with in their spaces is they say that they're too direct. Why do you talk like that? Why do you say that to them? Are you angry? No, I'm not angry. I'm trying to get to where we're heading with the conversation. So we don't understand, right? Me giving, okay, you're coming in and we're getting ready to go over how you've been and I'm looking at your schedule and how you've been interacting. And then I come to you and go, well, you are really, really direct. Yes. People have a problem with that. So now you're coming at me with your lens of understanding that direct is a problem. I'm coming to you with my lens that direct keeps from problems from happening.
Yes.
And so now you're giving me a performance understanding on my paperwork based on your lens, not based on who I am, not based on outcomes, not based on whether or not I get the job done, not based on what my numbers are. You are looking at me through your lens, your paradigm. And as a result of that, you are writing your descriptive of me based on your show up. It's not mine. So you're keeping yourself from understanding that, oh, well, Stephanie, I don't do it that way. And what's powerful, Dr. Nika, is neither one of them is wrong.
Yes, neither one of them is wrong.
If you use avoidance communication to get to your end, okay. But mine is direct, and do not reduce how I show up to your lens and then say to me on my paperwork that I'm the problem. No, you just don't really know who you are and how you show up. Do you see how that is? That's why everybody has to know their blueprint.
Yes. I wish you could see the chat because it's blowing up right now. And I am doing my best to restrain myself from turning this into like a Nika personal therapy coaching session with Dr. Stephanie. I'm being honest, okay? I'm being honest. So you best be for sure that I'm going to be contacting you after this conversation because I need to unpack some stuff with you, with the Dr. Stephanie M. Kirkland. Let me say that.
Yes.
But yes, and I know that you keep repeating yourself because that is the fundamental answer here. Everybody has to have that same level of self-awareness.
Yes.
Here's what I want to try to address, though.
Okay.
What is the responsibility of organizations who are employing people of all different styles and backgrounds and demographics when they know that they want them to show up at their best? Yes. And that's why I think the question before it spoke to like talent assessment, succession planning, performance management. So I get the individualized responsibility, but when I think about how much this impacts workplace culture and just interactions, what are you saying to like organizational leaders about their responsibility to create these spaces and opportunities for people to dig deeper into this self-identity leadership?
What I am saying to them is you have to decenter typical leadership norms.
Yeah.
And it's not that, and you need to expand the capacity of your developmental processing and trainings. So that everyone can be on the same playing field. A lot of the issues is centered around ignorance and really not understanding what's happening in the brain, not understanding that, here's let me give you this example. We have to redefine what unity means. For most people in most organizations, unity is centered on what we call a social identity theory, which means that we all come together around a concept of understanding, and that creates community and relevance. But if we change where unity really supposed to lie, unity is not sameness. Unity is not assimilation. Unity is us coming together to go towards the goal, to go towards the end, to go towards where it is for organizational productivity.
Yes, common unity. We break that word down. Sometimes we can think about it that way. Yes.
Right. So unity is not sameness with regards to me and you, Dr. Nika. Unity is, okay, bring your ideas, bring your perspective, bring your lens to the table. I'm going to bring my ideas, bring my lens, bring my understanding to the table. We're going to put the goal and the outcome at the top of the conversation. And then we're going to do what we call human interactions, win-win relationships. We're going to create a culture of win-win relationships where I can, have psychological safety. I can put it on the table. It's not about me getting all of what I want, you getting all of what you want. It is about the end. It is about how are we getting to the goal? How are we getting to the productivity? How are we getting to the change? It's not about me winning. It's about us winning in a collaborative way. But the only way for us to get the best of the understanding is for everybody to be free to put their ideas on the wall. And if it don't stick, it don't stick. If that ain't yours, because I'm comfortable with who I am, right?
Yes.
I'm not offended that you don't like my idea. Okay, if you don't like it, it's fine. It's not about that. It's about what is going to be best for the organizational outcome. And what is best for the organizational outcome is me coming to the table in all of the greatness of who I am, because that's when you get the innovation. Research shows that. That's where you get the creativity. That's where you get the productivity. That's where you get the great camaraderie. That's where you get healthy relationships, because I understand what it means to show up and all of my difference. I have the capacity to see you in that same light and we together are trying to get to an end. Does that make sense? I hope I answered the question. So
Yes.
the organization, we know what they want. They want their end result. They want their money. They want their increase. They want their sales. And so my conversation is, if you want the best of every individual, you have to allow them to be who they are. And you have to change your understanding of what unity means, because as soon as you shift that conversation, that unity is not about sameness and assimilation. And think about it, this is historical. This is what the United States was founded on, right? So we have these unconscious lenses in the back of our heads about what that looks like. And we're bringing it into organizational spaces, and we're missing out on the greatness of what's sitting right in the room.
Yeah. So there's a question that I was going to ask you, and it aligns with the question from one of our audience members, Precious Boyle. So thanks for this question, but it relates to how women in leadership can find or develop their identity. So specifically, I'll state it the way that Precious wrote it in the chat. Are there tools that you can offer to support organizations in auditing their leadership prototypes to recognize biases and what they have defined? I'd love to be able to offer those to my clients.
So there are, now this is what's beautiful about identity-centered leadership. You know what it is. I can do a DISC assessment all day long, and you know how to, I can do a 360. We have those types of tools, but the power of identity-centered leadership is the work to do the personal work. It's like being on an archaeological site. That's what I tell people when they come to my class. Okay, we put on your hats. We're going on an archaeological dig, but you're the dig, right? Yeah. Right? Okay, so let's start doing this self-awareness. It begins with self-awareness, right? Why did you say that? Why did you do that? What does that mean? Where did you get that from? Questions like that. Like, what is your belief systems around? Giving people concepts and conversations for them to do the self-discovery work about why they're showing up the way they're showing up and what that looks like for them. And then giving them the option to say, you know what? That was my mama. Dr. Nika, that was my mama right there.
That's where I came from. Yes.
But it's slowing down enough to recognize how you're living your life out and what those values are, what those characteristics are, what those beliefs are that are controlling you. And I think that we're so unconscious about how we're existing. People haven't learned how to live. Come on, Dr. Nika. We haven't learned how to live. We've learned how to exist. Research shows us that by the age of 8, our personality shaping has been done. So think about this, Dr. Nika. If you have not done any personal development work since you were 8, you're walking around with an 8-year-old personality.
Yeah.
So we're in organizations with people with that 8-year-old perspective, because they've never done the personal development work to understand or to reimagine or to redevelop or to challenge their engagement to, why am I angry? What does that mean? Where did that come from? What is my frustration? What are the roots of my baggage? Because we have been so inundated with trying to get from one place to the other. We've never taken the time. And that's why well-being is so important, right? To deal with the issues and the continuities of who we are as individuals, knowing that who I am impacts how I show up.
Yeah.
How I show up impacts my relationship, impacts my leadership, impacts what I interpret going on around me, because of my lens. We have to correct the lens.
Yeah, it impacts how I empathize, how I problem solve, all the things, how I communicate.
Everything. We cannot get around identity, Dr. Nika.
No.
You cannot get around. You can ignore it all you want to, but what'll happen is you'll turn around and someone will tell you what they see, and you'll be like, who? Me?
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
Right.
We're in a fight.
It seems so simple, but yet there's a reason that you have positioned yourself to be able to help people navigate the complexity of it, because it is complex in some ways. And so this really gets to the next question from one of our audience members. And this question is coming from Deborah Williams. But, are there self-awareness tools that you would recommend for those leaders who may still be sitting at that 8-year-old personality, trying to find their way, right? I mean, there's so many tools these days that you really don't know how to evaluate, which ones do we go to? Do we use a combination? So how do you guide people when they're looking to get on that journey?
I tell people to start with self-awareness. I tell people to start. Now, this is something everybody can do all weekend. This is y'all's homework. We're going to start with tool number 1.
Okay.
Self-awareness.
Self-awareness.
Pay attention to how you're interacting and what you're doing this weekend. And I want you to ask yourself some questions. Give yourself permission to slow down. That's the first key to self-awareness, right? Yeah. You got to get out of busy mode, slow down. And I want you, when you interact with people, ask yourself, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Where did that come from? Why did I do that? Why did I say that? Where did that come from? And after you ask yourself those questions, then say to yourself, do I want to keep it? Next interaction, you're driving down the road. Oh, and now you're in road rage. And I want you to slow down and go, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Why did I react that way? Where did that come from? And if we just start doing that one simple exercise will change your life. Yeah. Because you are now evaluating who you are and how you're showing up and deciding if that is what you want. And then you have the availability to say, do I want to stay here?
Yeah, do I want to keep? I love that follow-up question is so important. It's not just that self-reflection of like answering those questions, why did I do that? What, but it's also then, do I want to keep it? So it's then assessing, you're reflecting, and also you're assessing, is this healthy for me? Is this useful for me? Is this how I want to show up to the world? Yes.
And then you have to ask the question, what is the belief that was attached to this? Right. Yeah. And then what is the new belief? Because guess what? That same stressor is coming. Yeah. And you're going to have a script to deal with the same stressor.
Right. I love the slow down tactic too, because, admittedly, I have a right now spirit. I am like, and I think that just in general, we live in a society where we're always just filling our days with what feels productive. Yes. And if it doesn't feel like we're getting our hands busy and our hands dirty and we're doing things, and sometimes it feels like it's not productive. And so that's really kind of this busy mindset that we have. And so I love the notion of slowing down, using that as part of the tactic when we are really assessing, going through those questions and assessing how we're showing up in that moment. That's really critical.
And busy mindset is a belief.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a belief.
It's not necessarily productive. Yeah. That's so true.
Gandhi says it like this: our beliefs become our thoughts become our words become our actions. Yeah. Our actions become our habits. Yeah. And our habits direct our destiny. I love that quote. So that's why I say slow down. We have to analyze the belief, because that belief is going to turn into a thought. And we don't even do that. We're not even paying attention to what we're thinking. We're doing self-deprecating behavior in our minds, right? Yeah. And there's a scripture that says faith cometh by hearing. We're thinking faith on the outside of us, but oh my God, faith cometh by hearing you.
Yes. Yes.
What are you
good,
hearing?
Dr. Stephanie. Yeah. So we have some requests, and this is coming from Tracy. So thank you, Tracy. But she's asking about your research. Is your research published, and it's somewhere where we can allow it to be accessible to this community?
Yes, it is. It's called The Portrait of a Leader.
Okay, The Portrait of a Leader. So, so my team is going to see if we can source that, but your research is called The Portrait of a Leader, and we're going to try to share that link into the chat. So thank you for that. Yes. Okay, another question. I'm watching the time. This is so good. Okay. And we did have, so this is from Kwabena. Thank you so much. I'm curious as to if you have done, or you know of anyone that has done similar research on Black/mixed multi-ethnic Black men. So, so he's saying, okay, we're talking about the women here, but what about the men? I hear you.
I can't help you on that.
Well, the answer is unfortunately no, but you know what? It sounds like a really good exercise. So maybe
It
you'll want to
would.
take that on, and maybe Dr. Stephanie can give you some pointers for
I
how to get that
will.
underway.
Yes. But again, the framework will be close to the same, because if you're
Yeah,
looking through my lens, an identity-centered lens, then of course everything begins with identity, no matter if you're male or female, no matter what color you
yeah,
are,
yeah,
right?
sure.
So it's the same, it is the same no matter who it is, right? Because we're going in organizations, everybody has an identity center, right? And everyone needs to develop what that blueprint is to be conscious. Not research shows that over 90% of our decisions are made unconsciously. Think about that. And the
Mhm.
majority of people believe they're living in their conscious mind. But
Yeah,
really, your decisions, before you make your decisions, have already been made by the patterns that you have created that shape your identity and how you show up in spaces. And that's why a lot of times it's so hard to teach people how to shift and change and deal with their unconscious bias, because they think that they're living here, but you're living here. And so
mhm,
that autopilot, that our brains are connected to the dynamics of how we can show up and do what we do, all that, all that quick thinking and
mhm,
wittiness, that is not a conscious action. That is a decision-based process that has already been centered in your brain. So if you're not doing that slow down, conscious belief, understanding why I'm doing that work, you don't have access to your unconscious brain until
right.
there are situations and circumstances to alert you of how you're interacting. That's why I gave you the first exercise, because it is through your interaction that you actually have a lens into what is already programmed in your brain from your youngest age. Some things that you might not even remember that you have actually calibrated because of its emotional impact on what happened to you in your past. And you think you're living at 50. Come on now. But really, you're living at an incident that happened to you in Bristol.
Yes,
And so
yes,
you're showing up with this lens of not being wanted or needing to be needed. And now you're in corporate spaces and someone's direct to you, and now your feelings are hurt, not because they did it, but because your autopilot, that lens, that brain, that fight or flight, that quick action that takes place in your brain done went through the file and it pulled out the file on something that happened to you in your past because of that emotional connection. And now you're using that in organizational spaces with your relationships. And you're so unconscious of it because
so
you think
unconscious
you're
of
living
it.
here, but my friend, you're living back here.
I think there's something to be said just for sitting in silence for like maybe just 10 or 15 seconds to soak all this up before we let you go. I really do. So I'm hearing from the audience, and I'm feeling this deeply within my own spirit that this is not our last conversation. Dr. Stephanie, we want to invite you back. I mean, in fact, my head is like blowing up right now with all of these thoughts around ways in which I want to get more women exposed to you and your message and your work.
Thank
And
you.
not just more women, but just leaders in general. This
Mhm.
is so good. One of the things that I just took a look at, I had to remind myself exactly where you're based. And you're in North Carolina. I'm in South Carolina. So listen, you
Okay.
better bet on the fact that we will meet up. We will have some time together. And I just thank all these folks for showing up to my personal therapy session. You didn't know this, but you were showing up to it.
Yes,
Everybody's like,
thank
no,
y'all
this
for
is my
coming.
therapy session. But no, in all seriousness, this was so rich. We did share in the chat the portrait of a leader. So thank you, Alfred. You're so great about having those resources to be made available pretty quickly to our audience. So thank you. In the spirit of knowing how rich this conversation is, I also want to introduce to this podcast community that we have on occasions received notes from many of you that have expressed how this space of sharing and hearing from different speakers has really impacted you in many different ways, both personally and professionally, and how you've taken some of the learning and been able to apply it and even help others. We've also heard from many of our co-host how they have had such a great experience in co-creating the learning that takes place during these hours of time. Why do I share all of that? Because those testimonials are coming right now organically, but we want to be intentional to capture them so that we can use them to share it out so that more people can become exposed to intentional conversations through our VodCast community or through the podcast. And so if you're willing, my colleague has placed a link into the chat. I would love it if as many of you as possible would just take a quick moment to fill that out. Let us know how intentional conversations is a value to you, and we would love to be able to share that with others. The recording will be made available. That question has come as well. It's made available every week, so you can always catch the replays. And we have also shared, or we will share again, I think we may have early on, but we'll share Dr. Kirkland's LinkedIn information. I do encourage you all to reach out, connect with her on LinkedIn, and just, again, take this information and reflect on it and follow the homework that Dr. Kirkland has given us for this weekend. I want to thank you so much for sharing with us. I want to thank this community for being here. And I want to give you an opportunity to close us out, Dr. Kirkland, in your own way. What would you like to leave us with today?
I want to leave with this quote that I think is, I want to do two quotes, if that's okay. The first quote is, if I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crushed into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. That's from Andrea Lord. She is so powerful.
Oh,
I love
yeah.
her. And then this next quote is from Elaine Weltworth, so powerful. And she said, when you exist in spaces that weren't built for you, remember that sometimes just being you is the revolution.
Beautiful.
Isn't that juicy?
Selah, it's very juicy. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You all take care. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Blessings. Bye.